Happy birthday to you, even if it's not your real birthday, because every day is the first day of the rest of your life. How are you doing today? Okay, so this is a new series of videos I'm going to start trying to do here. In particular, today we are looking at how to rewire how to erase negative memories from the past. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, straightforward as that sounds. Obviously, there's a process to it, and you can't really completely delete them. But you can get them to, well, actually, that's not true. You can delete them, really, because we all have memories from our past that we can't remember. If you ever looked back at old photographs of yourself from an insignificant part of your life for some reason, whatever, I came across one a few years ago, and it was a photograph of me at a party with a couple of people, and clearly it was a selfie that I'd taken myself. It was with an old style camera that you obviously not like these days when you can see the photograph straight away. Had to go and get it processed and so forth. And I was looking at this picture and I was thinking to myself, I do not remember this party. I do not remember these people I'm standing with. I don't remember the situation in the slightest. And that's just a physical representation of something that I just did not remember whatsoever. There have been other situations where people have said to me, "Oh, you remember when we did this, that, and the other?" And I'm like, "No, I don't really remember that." And of course, at that point, I'm starting to think to myself, maybe it wasn't me. Maybe they've misremembered me being there, or maybe that wasn't quite how they described it, or something like that. And that's why I've not remembered it. But when you can actually see a physical photograph that you clearly took yourself of an event that you can't remember at all, you start to realize that actually your memories are not quite as fixed and secure as you think they are. And the only reason that you think you can remember everything, of course, is because you can remember all the things that you can remember. But of course, you can't remember the things that you can't remember. So therefore, you've got no reference point to be able to look back and say that didn't happen or that didn't happen in that way. And we also have scientific evidence of people had whose memories have been changed. I read an article recently of a girl who remembered the 9/11 attacks in New York and said she remembered looking out of her school window when it happened and seeing the plumes of smoke going past her school window. And then they looked back and they worked out, what school was she actually at, which room would she have been sitting in, and there was no way that she could possibly have seen the cloud of smoke going past her window. So clearly, she'd put together the memories of seeing it on the television and the memories of being in her classroom, and combined the two things, and then created a false memory, effectively, of her past. And to her, it was completely real. She completely vividly remembers it. But actually, what she'd done is constructed a new memory. I also had a friend who was German who I met when I was walking across the Camino de Santiago. And he said that his memory of the falling of the Berlin Wall is so hazy that he can't remember whether or not things that in his memory are times when he was actually at the wall himself during that period of time, or things that he saw on the television at the time. And he struggles to remember, was that what something I saw on the television, or was that something I actually saw with my own eyes? And he says he can't remember one way or the other. And obviously, he's got no record of whether what was real, what was actually on the television. So he just says, well, I just have to accept the fact that some of those memories are not really the memories of my own. They're memories that I saw through the TV. And so this all just goes to prove that we can change our memories if we want to. And so what I'm going to talk about now is how you can actually do that process yourself consciously if you want to over the next few periods. And if you're watching this on the reel, then go and check out the main thing in my on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John V. Denby. So the way this works is the way your brain works, well, the way this process works actually is the same as the way your brain works. The way your brain works is it basically, whatever you spend the most amount of time thinking about is what your brain then goes and thinks. This is the most important thing to think about. Or this is the memory that I need to remember. And there's a quote I made a long time ago, which basically says, um, the stories you no I can't remember it. The memories you remember the most are the memories that you remember. I think it was words along those like effects. Anyway, but this essentially thing, the times, if you have memories from the past, if you keep telling the stories of those memories, then those memories will embed themselves in your brain. I've talked about this on previous videos about how your neurons actually work inside your brain, and how neuroplasticity works to allow you to adjust the way your brain works. Same thing that happens when somebody loses an arm. If they're right-handed and they write with the right hand, they lose the arm, they've then got to learn to write with the left hand. They could have learned to write with their left hand if they wanted to, while they still had their right hand, but didn't have to. There was no effort, there's no requirement to do it, so they didn't have to put the effort in, so they didn't bother. But as soon as they had to do it, then they had to rewire their brain to allow the left hand to write with the new memories. I've seen another good video of a guy who rides. There's a thing called a backwards bicycle, which basically, when you turn it to the left, the wheel turns to the right. So you have to turn it to the left to turn to the right, and you have to turn it to the right to go left. And it seems like, oh, that should be really simple to do. But actually, when you first get on that bike, if you've ridden a regular bike for years and years and years, you've got really, really well set pathways in your brain as to how to ride a bike. And when you get onto this new one, you just can't do it. People in England, at least anyway, have these bikes, and they say if you can go like 10 yards, then you can win £10 or something like that. And nobody can ever do it, of course, unless they train themselves to be able to do it. And of course, the guy who has the bike has trained himself to be able to do it, so he can show you and say, look, it's really easy. And then the regular person gets on it and they can't do it. So I saw a video online of a guy who actually decided to teach himself how to do this. And it said something like it took him something like, I can't remember if it was 3 months or 3 years of continual effort to do this. But it was a long time anyway, to rewire his brain to be able to ride the backwards bicycle. And then he went to Holland and he tried to get onto a regular bicycle and he couldn't ride the regular bicycle. But nobody could believe him. They were like, yeah, you're messing it up. And he's like, no, I really couldn't do it. And then he got his son, who was 3, 4 or something, who hadn't been riding a regular bicycle for many, many years. And the young child who hadn't got those really, really well set memories in his brain as to how to ride the bicycle could actually learn quite quickly how to ride the backward bicycle. And of course, then he had both in his mind at the same time. And again, it's the same thing with languages. If you haven't learned a language as a child, then it's much harder for you to learn a language as an adult because you've got all those pathways for your current language in your brain. But if you start to learn several languages as a child, you form all the pathways at the same time. And so therefore you're bilingual and you don't even really think about it. You just switch between them without even really worrying about it. Because as a child, you're just learning this stuff. And this is how our brains work. And so we can use that process to enable ourselves to erase negative memories from our past. And the way we do that effectively, and this is the simple version, obviously it's not quite as straightforward as this, is to just stop telling the story about those negative experiences. And not just stop telling those stories to other people in your life, but also to stop telling those stories to yourself. So stop remembering them, stop churning it over in your mind, going, oh, that thing happened, and you just stop it. Just stop it. There's a great video called Stop It, and it's a therapist. The lady goes in and says, I'm really scared of being buried alive. And he says, what are the chances of you being buried alive? So, well, not really, Wayne. Well, stop it then. She says, what do you mean stop it? Just stop being worried about it because it's never going to happen, so don't worry about it. Yeah, but I'm really worried about it. Yeah, well, stop worrying about it because you don't need to be worried about it. Just stop it. And it's the same sort of thing. Just stop thinking about those negative thoughts and stop going back. Now, I know somebody struggling with PTSD, it's not quite as straightforward as that. I get that. That's absolutely fine. But the process is still the same. You have to get your brain to unlink those neural networks over time. And you can do that in a number of ways. I've seen people doing it with havening, with EMDR, lots of other different ways of doing it, rapid transformation, NLP. These are all basically the same thing. And what they're really doing is they're just getting your brain to rewire itself to think differently from the way it's been thinking in the past. And that's all they're really doing. And if you want to talk to me, obviously one-to-one, then I'm quite happy to do that and help you to process those negative feelings from the past. But essentially, all you're really doing is stop telling the story. Stop telling other people the story of your negative past. Stop telling yourself the stories of your negative past. Just stop it. It's simple as that, really. Because the more times you stop thinking about it, and I know, again, it's difficult to stop thinking. It's like I say, when it's stop thinking about a pink cow, and immediately you're thinking about a pink cow. So if I say stop thinking those negative thoughts, you're immediately thinking about the negative thoughts. But the point is to do something else that I've often talked about in the past, which is catch, cancel, correct. This comes from Jill Stanton, taught me this one, which is as you hear yourself thinking the negative thoughts, go, oh, I've caught it. I'm going to cancel that negative thoughts and I'm going to correct it and think about something else. And it's really hard to start with. And even I do this as well, because I keep telling the story of how I had a bad past and I got into a lot of debt and I've struggled with money, for the last 15, 17 years. And I've told that story a lot. And I've even just recording this, as I'm saying this out loud to you right now, I am realizing I do this myself. I need to stop telling that story, or at least I need to stop telling that story in a negative way. Because that's the other tip of this, is you can start telling. I mean, if you really need to tell the story for whatever reason, you can start telling the story with a positive spin. So this happened to me, but this is the good thing that came out of it. This happened to me, but this is the positive result that came about as a result of that. So that's my tip to you today, is to have a think about that. Another example of how to imagine this, and I've done this in a previous podcast, I think, in the past, to think about your memories as a big house, like imagine a stately mansion, Buckingham Palace, if you will, that type of thing, or Downton Abbey, where there's loads and loads of little rooms, and inside all those little rooms, there's ornaments and there's furniture and there's pictures and candlesticks and all that kind of stuff in each one of those little rooms. Now, if you don't go into all of those rooms, and of course, in order to keep them all pristine and clean and tidy and so forth, you have to go in and polish them all the time. If you've watched Downton Abbey, you've got the servants who do that stuff all the time. They're around polishing all the jewellery and the candlesticks and the tables and polishing everything and keeping everything spick and span. But of course, if they weren't doing that, if they just left it, and if you ever watched Charles Dickens' I forget the name of it, Miss Havisham. Anyway, I'm sure you know Charles Dickens' movie, Great Expectations. Great Expectations. There's a scene at the beginning of that with Mrs. Havisham, who's been sitting in one room and is still in her wedding dress, and she hasn't touched the rest of the house, and everything has got all dusty and decayed and rotten and so forth. And that's effectively what happens if you don't go into those rooms in that big stately house and polish all the memories and so forth, polish all the candlesticks and the paintings and so forth. If you don't go in there and polish them and keep them all up to date, and you just close the door and then don't go back in there again, eventually that room will decay. It's a science law of entropy, which is over time everything tends to dissolve into chaos. I think that's not the way it is. But basically, if you've structured something over time, it will just break down into dust effectively. And we know this because if something isn't growing, it's stagnating, and if it stagnates for too long, it starts to die. That's how nature works. That's how the life works. That's how our brains work. And if you don't keep repeating those neural networks, those neural pathways, they eventually die. It's called, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Calcification is what creates the things in the first place. Long-term potentiation. There you go. That's what it is. So long-term potentiation. That's what formed our memories in our brains. Is repeating the memory over time, and it eventually creates a bond between the neurons in our brains. And the more times we remember the memory, the stronger that bond becomes, the stronger that memory becomes, the stronger that neural network becomes. And the only way to break that is to not use it. And as we not use it, the brain then starts to say, "Oh, this is not very useful. It's no point in keeping up all this energy to keep this thing connected. Let's start breaking it down and start using this stuff for other means. So let's just crack on and do that." And that's how it works. So that's my task for you. That is how you rewire your brain to get rid of negative past experiences, negative memories. Is to basically stop thinking about them, stop repeating the memory, catch, cancel, correct. Catch your thought and go, "Oh, I'm telling that story again. Don't want to cancel that." Either tell a positive version of that, positive outcome of that story, or just don't tell the story and just tell a different story. Tell a good story. Focus on the good stuff that happens. And if you want to do this in your life, you want to start focusing on the good stuff in your life, I have a process that helps you do this. It's called my Create Happy process. It's a PDF. You download it. It's free. findyourfire.co.uk/create happy thoughts, or create happy if you like. Findyourfire.co.uk/create happy thoughts, or .co.uk/create happy. They both work. Hopefully they'll be in the description when you're watching this, and hopefully they'll be helpful to you. And just download that, and effectively what you do is before you go to bed, you think of good things from your day, and then you remember them and you repeat them to yourself. You try and create those bonds, and then while you're sleeping, your brain goes, these are the good memories. And what you haven't done is you haven't thought about the negative stuff during the day. And then the next morning when you wake up, you look at the list again and you go, these are the good things that happened yesterday. I'm going to remind myself of those. That's fantastic. And you start rewiring the positive things that are happening in your life going forward. And that's the first step in moving forward and changing your life for the better. Get rid of the negative stuff in the past and create some positive stuff in the future going forward. Hope that's helpful. Let me know in the comments below. Take care of yourself. Have an awesome, whatever day it is today, Thursday. Sending you all the love. Mwah! And remember, every day is your birthday. So every day is the first day of the rest of your life. Every day is a chance to start your life all over again and forget the past and create a new future that's fitting for you.